Good morning. The July the 11th, 2018 meeting of the Board of Investment is now called to order. In the interest of promoting the orders and efficiencies of these hearings, persons who are disruptive to the hearing will be asked to leave the hearing room immediately. Meetings of the Board of Investments are open to the public for the duration of the meeting. The hearing room must be vacated at the conclusion of the meeting. Failure to comply may result in a charge of trespassing. Madam Deputy Controller, are there any corrections, additions, or deferrals on the agenda?
Good morning. For today's agenda, the board did not receive any protests. There is one correction on page 80 under amount of money and source. After the first series of zeros, there currently is a period. Please delete that and replace it with a comma so that number will properly read $5 million. We have the following abstentions that have been reported thus far. For the Honorable Mayor Pugh, there are no abstentions. The Honorable President Young will abstain on page 34, item 4, and page 63, item number 2. In addition, the Honorable President Young will vote no on page 72, number 4. The Honorable Comptroller Pratt will abstain on page 85. Remaining on the non-routine agenda are pages 88, item number 1, and page 88, item number 2. Mr. President, members of the board, that is the one correction for today's agenda, as well as the abstentions and no votes that have been reported thus far. Thank you.
Thank you. I would direct the board members' attention to the memorandum from our office dated July the 9th, 2018, identifying matters to be considered as routine agenda items together with any corrections and additions that have been noted by the Deputy Controller. I will entertain a motion to approve all of the items contained on the routine agenda.
Mr. President, I move approval of the routine agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion carried. The routine agenda has been adopted. The first item on the non-routine agenda can be found on page 88, item number 1, Department of Audits, Audit Reports, Mayor's Office of Employment Development, Youth Works, 2017 Summer Program Audit. Will the parties please come forward?
Good morning, members of the board, President Jack Young, Madam Mayor, Madam Controller, Audrey Askew, City Auditor. 2017 Youth Work Summer Program Audit. The original purpose of this audit was to identify erroneous payments to participants. The Department of Audits performed tests on the Youth Works program using the risk-based audit approach. The risk-based audit approach places emphasis on areas where mistakes are relatively likely. That is not to say that an area we believe is of lower risk does not warrant concern. The criteria, and this is the criteria for each of the 3 findings. The Committee of Sponsoring Organizations, COSO, and Standard Business Practice requires entities to maintain a system of internal control that provides reasonable assurance that transactions are properly recorded and accounted for to permit the preparation of reliable statements. Finding number 1, improper payments. The Department of Audits obtained an ADP generated report dated 8/18/2017 from Youth Works that identified 162 participants with a total payroll value of $42,533 with an indication of never activated card. Since the cards were not activated within 30 days of issuance, the cards were canceled and the 162 Youth Work participants were sent checks. Youth Works confirmed with the guardians of 11 participants the receipt of improper payments and received funds back from one of the 11 participants in the amount of $384. The Department of Audits also received $214 from the parent of an additional participant not included in the 11 participants identified above. Of the 10 remaining participants tested for one pay period, $3,756 was not recovered by the Youth Work Office. The cause, lack of oversight, allowed improper payments to be undetected in cases where the participant did not actually work. Of 11,000 registered participants, 8,000 of those participants received job placement. However, the remaining 3,000 did not receive job placement. ADP is a third-party vendor responsible for processing participants' payroll payments upon submission of payroll information by Youth Works to ADP. After a 30-day period of card issuance, the unactivated cards were voided, and ADP processed and mailed payroll checks directly to participants, of which some did not work during the stated period related to the voided cards. Youth Work Services discovered this error after the 5-day window allowed by ADP A-Line to discover errors made in payroll in order to reverse the funds. Youth Works attempted to contact the guardians of 162 participants to request repayment of these improper payments in a form order other than the improper check not issued to the participants. The effect: improper payments result in the city's loss of revenues, decreased integrity and unreliability of information provided by the Youth Works program. This could lead to decreased state funding for the program. We recommend Youth Work establish procedures to ensure that A-Line cards are only issued to participants that receive job placements and maintain records to support performance of a review to ensure participants are paid only for hours worked. Even though it says auditor's response, I want to go on and continue, because when they responded, we have a counter response, which auditors are allowed to do. Our response to MOED's risk tolerance of 2%, which they stated does not appear to be material. First of all, risk tolerance, the willingness of a person or organization to accept or tolerate risk. In addition, risk tolerance is an investment term and does not relate to audits. Is MOED willing to tolerate erroneous payments identified during audit testing for one period to participants in the amount of $4,354, possibly 4 jobs, with about $42,533. That's possibly 42 jobs. MOED's calculation for risk tolerance of 2%, 162, which was the never activated cards population, divided by 7,504, which is the total population. Overall, the response identified above is incorrect and inaccurate. It is an error to take a subset of a population, divide by total population. The 2% calculation is an improper way of identifying risk. In addition, it is inappropriate to use 7,504 because Department of Audits tested never activated cards, not overall payroll. The correct calculation: take a sample and divide it by its population, not population divided by population. The correct calculation would be 12, which was our sample size, divided by 162, the population of never activated cards, to come up with a sample size of 7% tested. Department of Audits tested a sample of 12 participants for one pay period and noted that 100% of that sample was erroneously paid for that pay period in the amount of $4,354. That's 12 more youth workers that could have been hired to receive benefits from the program. Auditor's response to MOED's comment on the 7,504 youth work participants. Department of Audits payroll testing on youth work participants during the 2018 CAFR audit. Testing of youth work payroll was specifically tested in the 2017 CAFR payroll testing, and the City of Baltimore received a material weakness as a result of that test. Therefore, there wasn't a need to reperform and sample the payroll test for 7,504 participants in this audit. To retest the sample from the 7,504 population would be duplicating efforts already opined on in the CAFR audit. The youth work participant selection and payment review process needs to be accurate. Although baseless, even if the total MOED calculation was 0.5%, what may not be material to MOED is dismissive. To use materiality as a factor relating to a small dollar value is not taking into consideration the overall effect of the Youth Works program. Materiality should not be highlighted when participants receive erroneous payments. Tell a youth worker not hired who could have received those payments is not material. For some of these participants, it's their only source of income. If the participants meet the eligibility requirements to be youth workers, this income could financially assist their families. In addition, these earnings could be used to contribute to food, back to schools, clothes, supplies, or any other need.
I was going to respond at the end of all of them, but do you want me to respond one by one?
You can respond.
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. I want to thank the auditor for conducting the audit. It's always good to have fresh eyes. As she mentioned, her review is from last summer, the summer of 2017. Obviously, we're in this summer now. We've taken some of her recommendations and already applied them. I do want to give some context to what we're talking about here. YouthWorks is a really unusual program in which, obviously, it's about young people, but it's also a very external program. As much as we're working internally, we have many external partners. Last summer, as the auditor mentioned, we had 8,000 teenagers going to work. 40% of them were 14 and 15-year-old teenagers that were asking to follow certain procedures. And there are 900 work sites across the city. The great majority of those are nonprofits and community-based organizations. Very few of them are city government. So to put that in perspective, for a 5-week summer jobs program, we're talking about 3 pay periods, which means we're collecting 24,000 timesheets, which represents 200,000 days of work, 400,000 times of signing in and out, and 1 million hours of work that young people produce for our city, which is terrific. It requires us, just on the pay periods alone, to visit the work sites 2,700 times. So to call this labor-intensive would be an understatement, but it's significant. With respect to the auditor's particular finding, the first thing that's really important to understand is that she frequently uses the number 162 as never activating the card, implying that that is something negative. The reality is that the cards come in a sealed envelope. They come to us. We deliver them to the work site. It's up to the young person to activate those cards. That they are free to do so. Not activating the card is not necessarily a bad thing. They might choose to have a check. So using the denominator of 162 and implying that all 162, something inappropriate happened, is not correct. Similarly, she then took the total sum of those dollars, $42,000, as if that was all negative, and that is also not correct either.
Okay. The 162, the entire population was 7,504. As I stated in the beginning, the purpose of this audit was to look at erroneous payments. We asked for an area, or we look in an area that could be highly misstated. The 162 was the never activated cards. We looked at that as being a highly material area that could have misstatements. Therefore, that's why we tested that area. And then your second part was what was the other part?
I don't have any problem with testing the area. I just want to make it clear that 162 is not necessarily representing 162 errors. It's just a population of young people that did not activate their card and still in many cases worked.
Correct.
The other thing, if I may point out one more thing about the recommendation that's really important. So last year was the first year that we had the pay cards, and it was absolutely the right thing to do. Previous to that, like many cities, we were asking young people, we were paying them in checks. They don't have bank accounts at age 14 and 15. They were having to go to check cashers, which is expensive and dangerous, right? So we introduced pay cards, which was the right thing to do. Our decision was to have the pay cards delivered to us, all of them. The auditor points that out, and she's correct. We had those pay cards under lock and key. We had those pay cards in the envelopes addressed to the young people, not opened. Even if a person got, so the 3,000 cards that were not delivered allowed us to deliver them if they started to work. So even if a person got into the lock and keyed room, opened the sealed envelope that they shouldn't do, they still wouldn't be able to activate a card. In order to activate a card, you need the young person's social security number and you need their birth date, which is not kept with the cards. Even if a person gets into the room with a lock and key, opens the envelope and has the social security number and the birth date, and they activate the card, there's nothing they can do with that card. There's no hours on that card. So having those cards on site was critical for us to efficiently deliver the cards to young people and pay them on time. Now, as I mentioned, we took the auditor's draft report seriously, and we've already implemented it this year. And I want to explain to you what happens when we do that to explain how it's not so cut and dried, and it seems as though we should definitely follow that recommendation. Because now, this year, following the auditor's recommendation, we only order the cards for the young people that went to work on the first day. That seems like a good thing to do. But what happens in YouthWorks and happens all over the country is sometimes young people aren't able to work. They have another job, they have summer school, they have a health issue, they have a family matter, and they can't go to work. And what we do, starting on the second day of YouthWorks is, and to the auditor's point about how important these jobs are, we began calling young people from the waiting list because we want to make sure that every young person has an opportunity. The problem we're having this year, because we only ordered the 8,000 cards, is now that those young people have gone to work, we don't have a card for them. So because we don't make the cards in our basement, we use a third-party vendor. We've asked them to provide the cards so we can pay them on time, and the third-party vendor says, we're not going to have them on time. So we're going to take care of it. It's nothing for the board to worry about. We're going to work the extra hours and make sure young people get paid. But I don't think actually only ordering the cards for the young people that are supposed to start work is the right thing to do. Because what it would mean to us is, so that we don't have a finding next year, it means that we can't replace kids. And there's hundreds of kids that we were able to offer a job on the second day of work. So what I'd like to do, Madam Comptroller, with your expertise, as once we get through this summer, is to sit down with you and talk about how do we balance the need for making sure that we adhere to the, making sure that cards are not misused, which they were not, but also making sure that we can get young people to work.
But I think the point that Ms. Askew was trying to point out was the youth who received checks who did not work, and are we able to recoup that money? You know, I think that's what her main point was.
So there were 11 youth that pertain to, and that is a really small number when 8,000, and we would like to get that number to 0, and we'll do our very best. Again, last year was the first year that we had the pay cards, and the thing that made it difficult for us was this 5-day window that Ms. Askew mentioned, and that was an ADP decision. There are other vendors that the city could use that would give us more flexibility so that on the 6th day we would still have time to let them know, hey, we made an error on those 24,000 timesheets that we got to record the 1,000,000 hours in our city, in our site by hand. We're recording those 1,000,000 hours. We would have more time to recoup it, but with 5 days we weren't able to do it for those 11 cases.
Okay, we're going to move on to finding number 2. But those youth who did not return that money back should not be allowed to work.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Mr. Director, the law department will be available to assist you in that regard.
Terrific. We did contact all 11, by the way.
Okay.
Or they come back and work a summer and don't get paid. Go ahead.
And just remember, that's one pay period. Missing and incomplete payroll records, finding number 2. During our audit, we initially selected 11 discrepancy transactions that youth work discovered from a population of 162 participants with an indication of never activated card. Department of Arts added 1 participant that was not noted by MOAD. Due to significant findings noted during this testing, we expanded our testing by selecting an additional 32 transactions out of the 162 participants included on the never activated card listing. Based on our testing, we noted missing and incomplete records to support participant hours worked as follows. For the initial testing, we were unable to locate participant attendance for 3 out of the 14 transactions, 21%. Participant attendance in file had no attendance entry, blank or marked 0 for 5 out of 14 transactions, 36%. And participant attendance in file was missing participant and or supervisory signature for 2 of 14 transactions, 14%. Payroll hours were not paid in accordance with actual hours worked. Specifically, 2 participants did not work during the period tested. For our additional testing, we were unable to locate participant attendance for 3 out of 32 transactions, 9%. Participant attendance in file was incomplete, had discrepancy in the participant's signature for 5 out of 32 transactions, 16%, and unable to locate worksite attendance sheet. Condition: subsequent to the Department of Arts recommendation, a Youth Works management letter was provided to Department of Arts confirming missing documentation for 6 out of 32 transactions, 19%. Hours reported on timesheet did not agree to HRIS for 3 out of the 32 transactions, 9%, and were unable to locate participant attendance on file. Therefore, Department of Arts was unable to determine if supporting documentation was reviewed for 3 out of 32 transactions, 9%. Cause lack of oversight to ensure records are maintained, complete, and support participant hours worked. The Youth Work Office does not have proper controls in place to maintain accurate payroll information for the Youth Works program. the effect, the inability to provide support for participant hours worked, wages paid for the Youth Works program, and grant compliance may result in inaccurate reporting, return of state funding, and unreliability of information provided by the Youth Works program. Our recommendation, we recommend that Youth Works establish processes to ensure adequate collection, comparison, and review of payroll records to support actual participant hours worked. For supporting documentation of the review performed, we recommend Youth Works create a discrepancy form that identifies the reviewer's name, review date, participant's name, pay period, and any discrepancies noted. For noted timesheet discrepancies, we recommend Youth Works ensure timesheets be returned into the field for resolution and completed and returned back to Youth Works office for further review.
Well, again, I would point out that the time-intensive nature of this and the 24,000 timesheets, the 400,000 signatures that we're looking at, the 2,700 visits that we have to do to each site, again, at every corner of the city that we have to pull back and then enter into the system. I think we as a city have to make a decision about when we have a timesheet where a 14-year-old has signed in 10 times and signed out 9 times, do we want to put another process in place? Because that involves us stopping our work, calling the work site, getting the supervisor on the phone, the supervisor going to the young person. We can do that if we want to address the $4,000 that are overspent. But that would involve a cost to the city. So these trade-offs have to be made. We have a staff of 8. If we want to get to 0, I'm all for it. It means, though, that we will have to spend significant resources to have a lot more field monitors to handle 2,700 visits, et cetera.
Well, let me ask you a question. Are the timesheets reviewed prior to you submitting them for payment?
So we pick up the timesheets.
So why can't you review them then to make sure that they're accurate before you bring them back to have them processed?
Well, we do our best to review as much as we can, but we do have to visit 900 work sites, on a Friday and get them back and then get them entered so that we can pay young people on time. It's really just a matter of staffing. If we want to have more staff people, and that would involve more cost, that reduces the number of young people we put to work, we can do that, and we would have more time to deal with these fairly minor discrepancies.
So they can't fax them or scan them into you without you having to visit?
The problem is that they would still have to print them and sign them and then either fax or scan them. And again, we're dealing with some grassroots organizations, so some of them certainly could, but some of them would not. And then we would have problems with the fax machine not being legible. Okay. We're very happy to consider what options we have, but we do have to recognize there's a trade-off in terms of additional staff costs.
Okay, finding number 3. Falsification and use of participant name for job placement. Condition, during a discussion with ADP and Central Payroll, the Department of Artists was informed of possible fraudulent activity related to falsification in the use of a participant's name. The Department of Artists contacted the Youth Works office to gain additional information to determine the validity of the suspicion of fraud. One participant registered in the Youth Works program did not work during the period because the participant left the country. The work site replaced the participant with another participant, but used the original participant's name for the duration of working in the program. Cause, the Youth Works on-site supervisor authorized the above action without the knowledge of the Youth Works office. This could lead to questionable operations, including concerns of possible fraudulent activities. In addition, this could result in a request of funds to be returned. We recommend Youth Works strictly enforce the policy related to participant attendance and payroll procedures without exception. And before we get to your response, one of the responses that you stated was that you had already noted this, and I guess you didn't want the Department of Artists to release this, so I'm going to give you our updated response. The Department of Artists is required to report fraudulent activity to the Board of Estimates, even if it was initially obtained during communication with personnel. Our required communication to the board is as follows. AUC 260 provides authoritative guidance for communicating with those charged with governance. Identified fraud or suspected fraud involving management employees who have a significant role in internal control, or others when the fraud results in a material misstatement in the financial statements. That's AUC 240.40. Any other matters related to fraud that the auditor believes are relevant to the responsibilities of those charged with governance, AUC 240.41. Matters involving noncompliance with laws and regulations that come to the auditor's attention other than those that are clearly inconsequential, AUC 250.21. And in conclusion, for me, as auditors, our responsibility is to discuss and report results of tests performed during the course of an audit. These results should be used by the client to mitigate the risk of the same type of exceptional finding in the future. Our audit findings and recommendations are provided to the client to alert them that there is an issue with controls as well as diminished perception of the city with enforcing controls over a youth program. Instead of debating the results of actual tests, which were provided to the client as evidence, we ask for efforts such as controls be set in place to avoid these deviations in future years.
Well, first of all, I want to be clear that we were forthcoming with the information, and I'm glad it's in the report. The only question I have is whether it should be called a finding, and if you think it's a finding, I have no problem with that. I just want to be clear that this was an issue that the YouthWorks office identified during the YouthWorks season. YouthWorks starts the last week of June. It runs into August. We all wish that no one had bad intentions anywhere in our communities. But unfortunately, in every city, in every corner of the globe, there are a relative few number of people who do have bad intentions. And in this case, our controls actually detected the inaccuracy or the irregularity. And we did the right thing. We took it to the appropriate authorities, the IG's office, who pursued it. They contacted the work site. Just to be clear, the work site is not a city government site. It's a community-based site. There is no on-site city government person there like most work sites. They then pursued it. The work site paid the money back, which was something less than $900 in the month of September. So again, I have no trouble. I'm actually happy that I get to talk about it because to me, it's an indication that we are good stewards of the government's money, and that if something like this is to happen, we will detect it. And I hope that anyone who might have bad intentions is aware of that. So that's all I have to say on that issue.
Okay. I just want to thank Audrey for the audit and to make sure that we monitored a little better. And I recognize we're working with youth, 14 to 18 or something like that. 21. And we know that youth do make mistakes. I don't think they make the mistakes to, create fraud or anything of that nature. But I do know that we're dealing with children. And when we're dealing with outside organizations that the city have no control over, that our partners, these things happen. So I just want to thank Audrey for pointing it out. And we have to do a better job of monitoring or making sure that we have supervisors in place that's going to do the correct monitoring, because we want every kid to get a job. And we want the news to be that YouthWorks is mismanaging funds, because that's not what happened. And because we want people to continue to contribute, because we want to get as many youth working as possible, because the more we get off the street and into employment, it's safer for them.
Did you want to say? Let me just say thank you for the audit as well, and I think all audits are important because they give us a chance to be more introspective and prospective. But let me just say this. We want to make sure that the program continues at the high level that it's been working. And more importantly, whatever oversight needs to be put in place, then we have a responsibility to do that. And I think with technology today, Frank, that we can look at this as well, because we want this program to continue to grow. And I think when you look back at the years when we averaged something like 4,000 or 5,000 students a year, and now we're up to 8,000 and 9,000. It's almost doubled in just the last year, actually. Yep. So I know this is a massive undertaking, and perhaps we need to look at staffing needs as well. But I know the sincerity and the hard work that goes into making this happen. And I know that not only are you working with grassroots organizations, you're working with nonprofits, and everybody wants to help. But sometimes we might need to, all the training that you give to the young people to get to work, we might need to give some training to the grassroots and some of the nonprofits who aren't used to hiring people. We might need to provide that assistance as well so that they know what is required of them. Because, I don't want you to think for 1 minute that the work that you do is absolutely appreciated, and that those 14-year-olds, I was there. I saw 14-year-olds with their parents getting their first job for the first time, and that comes with a degree of responsibility. I think it's difficult for people to return money, but I'm with Jack. If somebody got money that they weren't supposed to get, they better get in here and get to work.
Absolutely.
Okay?
If I can just say, you all will remember that the federal government used to participate in summer jobs programs. When I say that, I mean they made a significant investment. And when they did, which was unfortunately more than a decade ago, we were actually able to compensate the work sites and pay for their supervisors. And in that day, it was we had a lot more ability to work with them. They weren't so shoestringed, but we are where we are right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The audit.
Mr. President, if I may, just for a moment, Mr. Director, I appreciate the auditor's use of the term fraud, but I was pleased to see you use the term irregularity, because not every false record or misjudgment constitutes fraud. This is a very expansive sense of fraud that's being used here. So I echo the mayor's congratulations on your work.
Thank you.
Okay, the audit has been noted. The second item on the non-routine agenda can be found on page 88, item number 2. That's the performance audit report, Baltimore City Office of Information and Technology for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2015 and 2016. Parties, please come forward.
Okay, this is the biannual audit. Enterprise innovation and application services, number of applications moved off the mainframe for fiscal year 16, and the percent of applications moved off the mainframe for fiscal year 2015. Finding number 1, BCIT did not have written policies and procedures to document the methodology for developing the 2016 and 2015 performance measure targets and reporting actual results for the number of percent of applications removed from the mainframe. Our recommendation, we recommend that BCIT establish written policies and procedures to document the methodology for developing performance measure targets and reporting actual results, including procedures for recording, reviewing, maintaining, and reporting actual results of the performance measures.
We concur with the finding, and we are working to develop a performance measure dictionary as well, so that we can develop methodologies and as we move forward.
Identify yourself, please.
I'm sorry. I'm Mark Cherry, CFO for BSIT.
I'm Frank Johnson, BCIT. Also, this was from 2016.
Yes.
Yeah, the recommendations were actually put into the latest mainframe migration program, which we executed with Blue Hill, and it's just wrapping up. So a lot of those things were taken care of in the latest project that we did with our mainframe outsourcer. Yep.
Okay. Finding number 2, fiscal year 2015 performance measure for the percentage of applications moved off the mainframe, 25%. Was changed in the fiscal year 2016 budget book to the number of applications moved off the mainframe, 1. In addition, those performance measure targets and the actual amounts were no longer included in the 2017 and 2018 budget books. Note, actual amounts related to performance measure targets are normally reported in the budget books 2 years after the related target years. Although the actual amounts for the fiscal year 2016 and 15 were not reported in subsequent years' budget books, according to BCIT, no applications were removed from the mainframe in fiscal years 2016 and 2015. Therefore, BCIT did not meet its performance measure targets for those years. Our recommendation, prior year performance measure targets should not be changed in subsequent year budget books without adequate disclosure by the Bureau of Budget and Management Research, BBMR, in order to avoid misleading performance results. Also, changes to performance measure targets and/or actual amounts should be approved by the Department of Finance and adequately disclosed by BBMR in the budget books. We also recommend that when performance measures are not met or become obsolete or inadequate, the agency document the reason the performance measure was not met and why the performance measure is no longer useful. Now, Mr. Raymond is standing, but I was just going to read that you all concurred, but you can.
Good morning. Mayor Pugh, President Young, Comptroller Pratt, members of the board, I'm Henry Raymond, Director of Finance. The Department of Finance concurs with finding 2 and the recommendation. We've implemented it, so this will be resolved moving forward. Thank you.
And the last one is not really a finding, it's just, I'll just read it though. Enterprise IT Delivery Services, number of cybersecurity awareness trainings. Audit results, the performance measure for the number of cybersecurity awareness trainings was a new performance measure established in fiscal year 2016 with a target of 32. According to a note in the fiscal year 2016 budget book, BCIT's Information Security Office planned to offer 32 email broadcasts and awareness training sessions in fiscal year 2016. According to BCIT, however, because expected funding to conduct those training sessions was not received, BCIT generated 44 cybersecurity email broadcasts and also disseminated cybersecurity calendars, posters, and flyers to keep city employees well informed about cybersecurity awareness information. Therefore, BCIT met its performance measure target for fiscal year 2016. This performance measure target was no longer included in the budget books for fiscal years 2017 and 2018. And I would like to conclude that BCIT they were very helpful in assisting the Department of Audits with understanding certain items that we needed to gain understanding for their area, and I believe that they worked very diligently in trying to remedy or resolve every area or every item that we had listed on the report.
We thank the auditor and the office of the auditor as well, and we definitely appreciate the work that they do and how they help us to find different things that we can improve on. And so we will continue to work forward even when we find funding constraints, as we did in this last with the cybersecurity. We'll continue to find other measures that we can work and improve on.
Thank you. The audit has been noted. There have been no more business before this board. We'll recess until bid opening at 12 noon.
Just bringing it over.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon. The board is now in session for the receiving and opening of bids. I have the following addenda to read. SDC 7777, drainage repairs and improvements at various locations. Please change the bid due date from July 11th to July 25th, 2018. B5000 5472. Janitorial services groups 1 through 6. Please change the bid due date from January the 11th to July 25th, 2018. Those are the addenda for today.
Okay, the addenda are noted.
GS 16810, Mitchell Courthouse roof replacement. A bid bond is required if the amount is over $100,000. Thank you. S6K Contracting. My goodness, thank you. Okay. Thank you, I'm sorry, that's a G. SGK Contracting, Inc. with the bid bond. $1,479,000. Thank you so much. Thank you. Simpson of Maryland, Inc. with a bid bond, $1,823,000.
Okay, these will be referred to the Department of General Services for review.
TR 17023, ADA Jock Contract Citywide. A bid bond is required if the amount is over $100,000. Santos Construction Company, Inc. with a bid bond. $350,400. J Villa Construction, Inc. with a bid bond, $347,000. ECM Corporation with a bid bond, $354,450.
These will be referred to the Department of Transportation for review. Thank you.
SC 921, improvements to the Gwynns Falls Sewer Shed Collection System, Area B. A bid bond is required if the amount is over $100,000. Metra Industries with a bid bond. $10,839,582. Sorry. Okay. Midas Utilities LLC with a bid bond. $10,890,593.35. That's better. IPR Northeast LLC with a bid bond. $11,748,000 excuse me, $570. Thank you. Excuse me. Spiniello Companies with a bid bond. $11,223,300. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Okay, don't worry. She'll find me something for you. For some reason, something's in my throat. Yeah, thank you. Oh, here it is. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you. Anchor Construction Corp. with a bid bond. $13,455,165.20.
That was 1-3, 1-3, not 3.
Shall we read that?
Sure.
Again, that was $13,455,165.20.
All right,
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Civil Construction LLC with a bid bond. $22,288,752.
These will be referred to the Department of Public Works for review.
SC 950R, Caroline Street Stormwater Pumping Station Upgrade. A bid bond is required if the amount is over $100,000. Metra Industries with a bid bond. Thank you. $893,000.
Okay, this will be referred to the Department of Public Works for review.
ER 4125, impervious area removal at various locations. A bid bond is required if the amount is over $100,000. Okay, good. Oh, wait, I found the bid bond. I got it. Bid bond too. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Just found it. Anchor Construction Corp. with a bid bond. $995,582.70. Civil Construction LLC with a bid bond. $1,290,201.30. Monumental Paving and Excavating, Inc., with a bid bond. $1,445,000. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll start again. $1,445,433.99. Yes. P. Flanagan and Sons Incorporated, with a bid bond. $1,276,998.80.
These will be referred to the Department of Public Works.
Okay. And for the final bid for the day, B5005463, OEM Parts and Services, 2018 Dodge Ram. No bids were received. Thank you. All right. There being no further business, we are adjourned. Thank you.